The world has no shortage of killers, but very few ever become legends. Fewer still manage to disappear so completely that they feel less like criminals and more like myth. In the late 1960s, when peace signs were painted on helmets and war protests shook American streets, another kind of battle erupted in Northern California. It wasn't fought with ideology or politics, it was fought with fear. It began with a parked car by a lover's lane. Two teenagers, Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, were shot on a cold December night in 1968. It looked like a random execution, another tragic crime in a country already stretched thin with violence. But 7 months later, a second attack struck, eerily similar, and suddenly what had seemed accidental became a pattern. A killer was on the move, and he was only getting started. This killer did not hide behind silence. He wanted an audience. He mailed letters to newspapers, written with a smug, theatrical tone that made him sound like he thought he was the villain in a comic book. He gave himself a name, Zodiac. He signed his messages with a strange symbol resembling a crosshair, and he taunted police with cryptograms so complex they felt less like clues and more like riddles meant to mock the very idea of justice. The letters triggered a media frenzy, the kind that turns killers into pop culture fixtures. But beneath the sensationalism was something far more chilling. A killer who enjoyed the game more than the violence. Someone who wanted control, attention, and power. In his letters, he threatened to shoot schoolchildren just for fun. He demanded newspapers publish his ciphers or face the consequences. He baited law enforcement with an arrogance that only fueled their determination to catch him. Yet, for every step they took, he stayed one step ahead. On September 27, 1969, he struck again. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing by Lake Berryessa when a hooded man approached them, carrying a gun and wearing a dark executioner-style costume. He tied them up, stabbed them repeatedly, then calmly walked to their car and wrote his symbol on the door, along with dates of previous attacks. Cecilia died. Brian survived to tell the world that the killer had spoken during the attack. The Zodiac wasn't a phantom. He was flesh and blood, methodical and unnervingly calm. 2 weeks later, another victim. Cab driver Paul Stein was shot in San Francisco. However, this murder broke the pattern. It happened in a crowded neighborhood, not in an isolated lover's lane. And Zodiac escalated the taunting. He cut a piece of Stein's shirt and mailed it to the press as proof. The police scrambled, interviewing suspects, chasing leads, and watching the city tighten with fear. For a moment, it seemed like authorities were closing in. Officers even unknowingly walked past the killer minutes after the murder, mistakenly believing they were looking for a black suspect because of a dispatch error. Zodiac slipped past them like a ghost. Then came the ciphers. The first major one, known as the 408 cipher, was cracked by a schoolteacher and his wife. But the second, the infamous 340 cipher, resisted experts for decades until it was finally solved in 2020. Even then, the decoded message gave no identity, no breakthrough, just more gloating. Over the years, dozens of suspects floated to the surface. Some were compelling. Most were delusional. Law enforcement put a microscope on men with strange hobbies, violent pasts, or conveniently vague whereabouts during the killings. One suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, stood out. He was odd, unpredictable, and disturbingly similar to the composite descriptions. But handwriting tests did not match, DNA did not match, and the case never stuck. The Zodiac did not just commit crimes. He cultivated folklore. His very existence felt like he was sculpting a performance. But then, almost abruptly, the performance ended. The letters slowed, the threats softened, and eventually, everything went silent. This is where the mystery shifts from a bloody timeline to a void, A disappearance so complete that investigators still argue about where, when, and how it happened. Some believe he died shortly after his last confirmed murder, taken out by illness, accident, or someone who didn't know they'd just erased one of America's most notorious killers. Others think he simply moved. After all, serial killers don't retire gracefully. Some change environments, some change patterns or even identities. It's possible he rebranded himself in another state, leaving Northern California behind like a completed project. A more unsettling theory suggests he was someone respected, someone integrated into society, living a life polished enough that nobody dared suspect him. A veteran, a teacher, or a technician. Maybe even someone with access to police habits and movements. If so, his silence wasn't a disappearance, it was a decision. There were rumors of later letters sent sporadically through the 1970s and into the early 2000s, but authenticity is debated. Forensic testing on envelopes and stamps had produced fragments of DNA, but none definitive enough to close the case. Time has become the Zodiac's strongest ally. Witnesses aged, died, forgot. Evidence degraded. Stray clues disappeared into archived boxes stuffed in dusty storage rooms. It is rare for a serial killer's legacy to last this long without resolution. Most mysteries get solved with technological advances, but the Zodiac remains untouchable, almost deliberately crafted to outlive every investigator who ever chased him. One of the most haunting parts of his story is how carefully he cultivated doubt. He exaggerated his victim count, mixing truth with fiction. He inserted false details into letters to muddy the waters. He wore disguises. He used misdirection. And he seemed to understand exactly how long public fascination would last and how to feed it just enough to remain relevant. In the end, the Zodiac Killer may not have vanished at all. He may have simply realized that disappearing was the final power move. The ultimate taunt, the final unsolvable cipher. Imagine him, older now, decades past his crime. Maybe he died quietly in a nursing home, surrounded by people who never knew who he really was. Maybe he lived long enough to watch documentaries about himself, amused that the world still chased shadows he planted half a century earlier. Or maybe he took his secrets to the grave intentionally, knowing the only thing more terrifying than a killer is a killer you can't understand. Every so often, detectives reopen the case. They test a new technology. They reveal a new suspect. And every time the Zodiac slips back into the fog. Files pile up, leads collapse. The man whose letters once demanded attention now rules in the silence he left behind. His disappearance was not an accident, it was a masterpiece. Whether he vanished through death, reinvention, or sheer calculation, the result is the same. He engineered the perfect unsolved mystery, and the world, decades later, is still stuck inside his game. Even now, his ciphers hang like unfinished sentences. His letters sit behind glass in evidence archives. His symbol is etched into true crime culture forever. Investigators continue to search for that one thread that unravels everything. But the truth is brutally simple. Some predators don't get caught because they are lucky. Others don't get caught because they are forgotten. The Zodiac did not get caught because he refused to leave a trail that wasn't built to mislead. What remains is the fear he left behind. Not because of what he did, but because of the blank space where his ending should be. That blank space keeps the story alive. It fuels books, documentaries, investigations, and arguments. It turns a murder into an enigma, a case into a labyrinth, and a disappearance into a haunting echo. Maybe that's exactly what he wanted. Not infamy, not fame, but performance. A place in the American psyche carved as deeply as the bullets he left behind. The Zodiac Killer's identity is still unknown. His motives remain tangled. His crimes are frozen in time. and his disappearance sits like an unsolved equation that taunts everyone who tries to solve it. In a world obsessed with answers, the Zodiac left only questions. And maybe that is the darkest victory a killer can ever achieve.